Sir, I'm going to need you to move to seat 34B, the flight attendant said, her voice polite, but sharp around the edges, like someone rehearsing kindness while rushing through protocol. The man in the aisle seat didn't flinch. He just looked up, eyes steady. Ma'am, that's the seat I paid extra for. Because of my leg. She hesitated. Then replied, we have a family that needs to sit together. This is the only way. He didn't argue. He just nodded once. Then slowly, painfully, he rose and walked toward the back of the plane alone. That moment should have passed like any other boarding shuffle, forgotten before wheels left the tarmac. But someone was watching. And 9 minutes later, the cockpit door opened. When the captain stepped out and did what he did next, no one on that flight would ever see silence the same way again. Thank you for being here. Sometimes, the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those, quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now let's take a closer look at what really happened. Salt Lake City, 6:12 a.m. Elliot Hayes sat perfectly still in the corner of gate B14, back straight, hands folded in his lap like he was waiting for a change of command. Not a flight. At 81 years old, he moved slower than he used to, but every gesture still held the sharp efficiency of someone trained to survive chaos. The pressed beige jacket he wore was modest, but its shoulders still hinted at a life spent in uniform. His slacks were neatly ironed, and the walking shoes, while worn, were immaculately clean, and if anyone bothered to look long enough, they'd see it a slight bend in the left knee, a stiffness in his gait. Not from age, from combat. 3 months earlier, Elliot had booked this trip on his own. No assistant, no travel concierge. Just him and a credit card that took him nearly a year to pay off. It wasn't for vacation or business. It was for a promise. His granddaughter, Cadet Evelyn Hayes, was graduating from the United States Naval Academy in Virginia. First in the family since him to wear the uniform. He had missed her high school graduation, missed birthdays, and a few holidays, but he was not going to miss this, not for anything. That's why he'd paid the extra 90 from his pension to get seat 120C, an IL seat in premium economy. It wasn't about luxury. It was about survival. 5 hours in a middle seat would lock up his bad knee so tight, he might not walk for a week. But seat 14C gave him legroom, just enough to stretch and reduce the pain. And pain was his constant travel companion. He didn't complain when they boarded early. Just gave the gate agent a respectful nod and made his way down the jet bridge, one hand steadying himself on the railing. No one offered help. He didn't expect it. Marines didn't beg. As he reached his seat, Elliot placed a small olive, green duffel beneath the chair ahead, carefully lowered himself down, and exhaled. The plane was still half empty, the light outside barely breaking through the windows. It was a moment of peace, brief and hard one. Then came the soft commotion 3 rows ahead. A flight attendant was crouched down, speaking to a woman holding a fidgety toddler. Another child clung to her jacket, and a third sat cross-legged in the aisle. Elliot watched from his periphery. No judgment, just observation. Moments later, that same flight attendant, a woman in her early 30s, chestnut bun, name tag reading, Amber, walked down the aisle toward him. "Excuse me, sir," she said, still smiling. "Are you seated in 14C? "Yes, ma'am." Elliot replied, voice calm, eyes alert. "We have a situation," she explained. A mother with 3 small children was separated during booking. They're spread out in different rows. The only 3 seats together are 14A, 14B, and 42C. "Yours." He nodded once but didn't move. "I booked this seat because of my leg. I have a medical condition, a combat injury." Amber's smile softened, but her posture remained firm. "I understand, sir. But we really need to accommodate the family." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He just asked, "What's the alternative?" Amber checked her tablet. "Seat 34B. It's in the back, middle seat." Elliot didn't speak right away. The silence between them was long, weighted. "I can't sit in a middle seat," he said at last. "I won't make it. It's not about comfort. It's about function." She gave him a practiced apology. "I really do understand, But if we don't reseat them, we may not be able to close the doors and depart on time. And there it was. Not a direct order, but the implication. You're the one holding us all back. Elliot looked around. Passengers were starting to glance their way. Some tilted heads, others raised eyebrows. He could feel it, the judgment, the assumption. An old man refusing to help a young mother with children. A burden, not the truth. Not even close. But that didn't matter now. He slowly unbuckled his belt. The movement hurt, but he didn't flinch. As he rose, gripping the armrest for support, he spoke low but steady. Name's Elliot Hayes. Master Sergeant, United States Marine Corps. Retired. Please note, I'm relinquishing the seat under pressure. Despite medical necessity, Amber nodded. No thanks, no understanding, just a signal to the family that the seats were now clear. Elliot gathered his bag, glanced once at the toddler now smiling at him, and gave a quiet nod. No anger, no fanfare. Just resignation. The seat was exactly what he expected. 34B. Rear of the plane. Middle row. The kind of seat you only end up in when all other options have vanished or been taken from you. Elliot Hayes lowered himself into it with slow, calculated care. Every inch down was a negotiation with the pain in his knee, a sharp reminder of the day it gave out in the mud and smoke of a place no one remembered anymore. To his right, a college kid with massive headphones, immersed in a movie. To his left, a businessman in a tightly fitted sport coat, elbows already spread as if marking territory. Neither of them looked up. Neither offered space. And no one, not even the flight crew, acknowledged the old man now hunched between them. The air around 34B was stale. The overhead light flickered once, then gave up. There was a faint sour smell from the nearby lavatory, and the drone of the plane's engine felt louder here. Closer somehow. But Elliot said nothing. He placed his hands on his lap, adjusted the duffel under his legs, and closed his eyes. He didn't need pity. But a little grace would have gone a long way. 3 rows ahead and across the aisle, Charlotte Bennett watched it all. She hadn't meant to get involved. She was a nonprofit consultant based in Richmond, traveling to Norfolk for a veterans fundraiser. In her early 40s, she wore no makeup, just a tidy navy blazer and jeans. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and her laptop sat untouched in her lap. But she'd seen it. The conversation, the hesitation, the quiet defeat on Elliot's face. She saw the way his jaw clenched when he stood. And now, watching him quietly fold into seat 34B like he was trying to disappear, something stirred in her chest. Not outrage, not performative sympathy, just knowing. The kind of knowing that comes when you've seen dignity quietly stolen. She reached for her phone. Not to post, not to rant. She just typed a message. Flight 784, passenger Elliot Hayes. Moved from confirmed aisle seat with medical necessity to rear middle, seat 34B. Not handled appropriately. Please escalate. CB. She sent it to a friend, an old college roommate, who now worked in guest relations at Continental Skies Airlines. Then she locked her screen and just watched. Back in 34B, Elliot shifted again. His knee was already locking. He tried stretching his leg sideways, but the man beside him offered no give. The young guy on the other side didn't even blink. There was no malice, just apathy. Elliot knew it well. He'd worn a uniform longer than most of them had been alive, but now, he was just another passenger, another complication, a problem someone had to manage. The silence around him wasn't passive. It was pointed, the kind that makes you feel not just alone, but erased. Still, he didn't complain. He didn't sigh. He didn't even reach for the call button. He just held still, eyes half closed, letting the engine's vibrations echo through old bones. When the final cabin checks came through, the flight attendants passed without a word. No apology, no recognition, not even a glance. But Charlotte noticed the hands. Elliot's hands sat on his lap like stones, strong, thick, scarred. One finger bent at an angle, like it never quite healed right. They were hands that had held rifles, carried brothers, dug trenches, wrote final letters. Now they sat in silence, unseen. Charlotte's phone buzzed. Received noted. Forwarding to operations. Unacceptable. Will notify captain if escalated. She read it, locked the screen, and said nothing. She didn't expect much. But sometimes, doing something, anything, was better than staying quiet. And sometimes, a whisper in the right direction becomes a thunderclap. In the cockpit, Captain Robert McAllister adjusted his headset. Former Air Force, 22 years of service, over 11,000 flight hours. His co-pilot read out the pre-flight checks as ground control gave clearance. Then a red notification lit up on his console. Passenger concern Hayes, Elliot veteran. Medically necessary seat reassigned. Escalation from guest relations. Flagged by internal PR rep C. Bennett Diamond Elite. Robert paused. The name hit him square in the chest. Elliot Hayes. It wasn't just familiar. It was unforgettable. The flight plan could wait. He unbuckled his harness. Hold taxi, he said quietly. The co-pilot blinked. Captain. I'll be back in 3. Captain Robert McAllister stepped into the aisle like a soldier entering a battlefield. His uniform was flawless. Navy epaulets, polished shoes, and the kind of posture that told you he still measured every movement with military discipline. As he walked through the cabin, the energy shifted. A ripple of silence moved row by row. Phones lowered. Conversation stopped. Even the air seemed to pause. Passengers watched, unsure what was happening, but sensing it wasn't routine. He didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't blink. When he reached row 34, he stopped. Elliot didn't notice at first. His eyes were closed, pain simmering just beneath the surface. Then the shadow fell across him. He looked up and saw the captain. Captain McAllister locked eyes with the older man, drew himself tall, and without hesitation, snapped a formal, crisp salute. Not casual, not performative. A military salute, sharp, respectful, absolute. The air around them froze. Elliot's mouth parted slightly. His hands twitched on his lap. He didn't know what was happening, but some part of him felt it deep in his bones. The captain spoke clearly, so every soul on board could hear. Master Sergeant Elliot Hayes, United States Marine Corps, retired, he said. On behalf of Continental Skies Airlines and as a fellow serviceman, I owe you an apology. Gasicode, not dramatic, just stunned. Even the businessman next to Elliot lowered his gaze. You should never have been asked to move from your seat, the captain continued. It was an error, one we're going to correct immediately. He turned to face the cabin crew. Eyes Ms. Amber Renner in the aisle. The flight attendant who'd initiated the seat reassignment appeared slowly from the galley, her tablet clutched like a shield. Yes, sir. You will personally escort Master Sergeant Hayes to seat 1A. First class. Immediately, Amber's mouth opened slightly. Captain, I believe 1A is currently. Then ask for a volunteer. McAllister cut in. If no one steps forward, inform them the captain of this aircraft is requesting that seat on behalf of a decorated combat veteran. He paused. Then added, not for Amber, but for everyone listening, and if no one gives it up, I'll vacate my co-pilot's jump seat, and if that's taken, I'll give up my own. A hush fell like snowfall. People stared. No one moved. No one wanted to be the reason that man remained where he was. Elliot blinked hard. He opened his mouth to protest but found no words. His throat tightened. Captain McAllister extended a hand, palm open. Please, sir. Let us fix this. Elliot nodded, once, and slowly began to rise. The businessman beside him stepped back without a word. The college student on the other side quietly removed his headphones and muttered, Sir, I'm sorry, sir. There was no shame in Elliot's face, but something in him shifted. Not pride, not ego, something older, recognition. As the captain helped steady him row by row, people began to shift, to turn, to murmur. Respect had entered the aisle. Charlotte Bennett watched from her seat. A tear welled unexpectedly in her left eye. She hadn't done it for credit, but something in her chest loosened, something she hadn't even known was clenched. Amber led the way down the aisle. She walked slower now, shoulders lower, the gravity of her earlier decision hanging visible on her face. When they reached the front, she turned toward the man in 1/8, a middle-aged executive sipping mineral water, legs crossed. Sir, she said softly, I'm sorry. We need to reassign your seat. The man blinked, surprised. Captain's request, she added. He turned and saw Elliot. The scars, the worn duffel, the stiff leg. Without a word, the man stood. It's an honor, he said quietly, placing his water bottle aside. Elliot didn't know what to say. He nodded faintly, shook the man's hand with both of his, then turned to take the seat. Amber helped him lower down, and for the first time in 5 hours he sighed. Not because the seat was wide or soft, because it let him feel human again. From halfway down the plane, a voice called out, "Sergeant Hayes." Elliot looked over his shoulder. A man in his 30s stood in the aisle. Clean-shaven, broad-shouldered. Civilian clothes, but the bearing of a soldier. "Champ Dwyer, Afghanistan 2009. You pulled me out." Elliot's brow furrowed, then slowly, recognition dawned. "Private Westmore." The man nodded. "You saved my life. We never got to say thank you." His voice cracked. He sat down before he lost control, but his shoulders shook. The silence in the cabin turned again. Not heavy with judgment now, but reverence. Back in the cockpit, Captain McCullister took a breath, then turned on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we depart, I need to make a brief announcement." The cabin held its breath. Today, a mistake was made. A man who served this country, who carries the scars of that service, was asked to give up his seat. Not because of an error in booking, but because of a policy that favored convenience over respect. He paused. "Let me be clear. We will not take off while injustice sits quietly in our cabin." Heads turned. Hands stilled. Master Sergeant Elliot Hayes is a Marine. He served in Kazan, Vietnam. He did not ask for special treatment. He asked for the seat he booked so his leg wouldn't lock up in pain. Another pause. This one longer. "We failed him, but we will not compound that failure by moving on like nothing happened. Then, we don't leave our own behind. Not in combat. Not at 30,000 feet." He clicked off the mic, and silence exploded into applause. Not loud, but real. It started slow, one set of hands, then another. Then it spread like a wave, row by row, section by section. Not for entertainment, but because it was right. Elliot didn't wave, didn't bow his head. He just sat still, and for the first time in years he was seen. The plane lifted into the morning sky like nothing had ever happened. But everyone on board knew better. For once, the turbulence wasn't the most memorable part of the flight. Elliot sat quietly in 1A, hands folded, a soft blanket draped across his lap, offered gently by a member of the crew, this time without being asked. Amber came by once more, this time without her tablet. "Sir," she said softly, "we're sorry." He nodded politely. No words, just acknowledgement. Dignity had returned. But forgiveness wasn't a transaction you rush. Annapolis, Maryland, 12:05 p.m. The wheels touched down with a sigh, not a thump. The sunlight spilled through the cabin windows like a slow curtain rising over a final act. Passengers rose, gathering bags and blinking at their phones. But not Elliot. He remained seated. No rush. No resentment. He had made it. And for once, he didn't feel like a burden. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, Charlotte Bennett passed behind him. She said nothing. But as they reached the open terminal, she gently touched his shoulder. "You reminded all of us who we're supposed to be." Then she was gone. He didn't know her name. Wouldn't have remembered her face. But he remembered the feeling. Being seen. At baggage claim, a young woman in a freshly pressed Navy uniform stood with a homemade sign that read, "Welcome, Grandpa Elliot." She spotted him limping toward her, and the sign dropped like a feather. She ran fast, reckless, arms wide. He didn't flinch, didn't brace. Just let her collide into him with the full force of youth and joy. "Your knees," she cried. "I've had worse." He smiled. And this time, the smile reached his eyes. They spent the afternoon together in a nearby park cafe. She told him about her assignments, her billet placement, her dreams of becoming a naval engineer. He asked questions, proud of every answer. Then her phone buzzed. "Grandpa, what happened on that flight?" she asked, eyes puzzled. "I'm getting texts from people. Some are sending me video clips." He simply said, "I had a bad seat." Someone stood up. That was enough. 2 days later, back in Salt Lake City, Elliot sat in the same kitchen chair he'd eaten breakfast in for 30 years. The same faded plaid curtain drawn halfway over the morning sun. A letter arrived. Cream-colored envelope, no stamp. Just the Continental Skies Airlines logo in silver foil. Inside was a note, "Dear Mr. Hayes, on behalf of our entire team, we apologize for the error in judgment aboard Flight 784. As of today, you are designated a lifetime guest of honor with our airline. No codes, no fees. Just tell us where you're going. We'll get you there." It was signed, Veterans Affairs Council, Continental Skies Airlines. He folded it twice. set it beside the American flag that stood neatly on his bookshelf, said nothing. A week later, another envelope came. This one bore the seal of the Department of the Army. Inside was a single, page-typed memo and one handwritten letter. The memo explained that, after a public inquiry, his personnel file had been reopened. A long overlooked report had been rediscovered. February 1968. Kassan. It documented how Master Sergeant Elliot Hayes had pulled 5 wounded Marines from a burning vehicle while under direct mortar fire. Despite his leg already shattered from earlier shrapnel, the action had gone undocumented due to battlefield chaos. Until now, the handwritten letter was signed James Lockhart, General USMC Ret. It read, Elliot, I was Corporal Lockhart, third man in that vehicle. You don't know me. But I've known you every day since. You didn't just pull me out of that fire. You pulled me back into life. I made it home, built a family, became a man worth remembering. Because you refused to walk away, even with a leg that wouldn't move. You were never invisible. Not to us, J. Lockhart. Elliot sat with that letter for a long time. No words, just stillness and breath. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. Elliot Hayes didn't become a celebrity. He didn't appear on television, didn't sign any books, didn't give interviews. He didn't want that. But his story moved. Not like a trending post, more like a whisper through church halls, VFW posts, school auditoriums, and quiet dinner tables. It began with a story. Charlotte Bennett, back in Richmond, opened her laptop one quiet morning. She didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She just wrote the truth. A man who asked for nothing, a flight crew who forgot to look deeper, and a captain who didn't forget. The post was published in a regional paper, then syndicated, then picked up by national news outlets. By week's end, the story of the salute at Seat 34B was everywhere. Classrooms read it aloud. Military families printed it and taped it to kitchen walls. Veterans halls shared the photo of Elliot in Seat 1A, head bowed, sunlight falling across weathered hands. It became more than an image. It became an emblem, not a glory, but of remembrance. Back in Salt Lake City, Elliot didn't change much. Still woke early, still limped to the mailbox, still made his coffee black. But his walk was different, slightly taller, a little steadier. The man who had spent years feeling invisible now felt present. One Sunday, he was approached outside the post office. A teenage boy, baseball cap, nervous hands. Sir, you're the guy from the plane, right? Elliot smiled, small but warm. I'm a guy from a plane. The boy handed him a folded paper. A school assignment, a poem. The last line read, when the world forgets, honor waits patiently until someone remembers. Elliot didn't speak. He just nodded and held the paper like it was made of gold. Sometimes he sat on his porch, late afternoon sun warming his face. When neighbors walked by, they nodded. Some waved. A few saluted. And one child, maybe 8 years old, once stopped, looked up and asked, Mister, are you the man who got his seat back? Elliot chuckled. He said, I'm the man who got seen. And maybe that's all any of us ever want. Not medals, not speeches, just to know we mattered. That our pain wasn't forgotten. That anyone, stood up when we were asked to sit down. Not all heroes wear uniforms anymore. Not all salutes come in parades. Sometimes the most sacred battles are fought in silence, on airplanes, in grocery stores, in offices, where dignity is quietly tested and easily overlooked. This story isn't just about a seat. It's about how quickly we forget to ask deeper questions. How often we see inconvenience instead of service, weakness instead of sacrifice, lay slow limp instead of a battlefield scar. But most of all, it's a reminder that honor never truly disappears. It just waits for someone to see it again, waits for a captain to stand up, waits for one person in row 7 to say, enough. And when it's remembered, when we choose to see, it changes everything. So the next time you're in a hurry or the world feels loud, pause. Look around, because someone nearby may be carrying a story that never made the news, a wound that never healed right, or a sacrifice this country never thanked properly. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one who finally sees them. Has anyone ever stood up for you in a moment when no one else did? Or have you ever been the one to speak when silence felt easier? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this touched something in your heart, help us honor more quiet heroes by subscribing to Grateful Stories. Tap the bell so you won't miss the next reminder of who we truly are when we choose to remember. Until next time, be kind, be present, and never underestimate the power of one quiet act of honor.